Would you believe me if I told you that this is serious artwork? It is. It was actually displayed in a prominent art gallery in Miami, Florida. And would you believe me that if I told you that the prestigious Sotheby's auction house actually sold this in New York 11 days ago? They did. Here is a picture of that auction taking place. And would you believe me if I told you that someone actually bought it? This man did. His name is Justin Sun. He is a Chinese billionaire who founded a cryptocurrency company. And he paid, get ready for this, $6.2 million for that artwork. A banana duct taped to a wall. What do you think he did with it after he bought it? Well, he took it down off of the wall, and then he ate it. He said it tasted better than any other banana. Well, of course it did. He paid $6.2 million for it. Doesn't it make you wonder how someone like that could be wise enough to build a multi-billion-dollar industry? He paid over $6 million for a banana duct taped to a wall. And doesn't it make you wonder who bid against him to raise that cost up? Okay, that part of the story isn't true. But the rest of it is. Can you believe that? How ridiculous. And this probably tells us a lot of things about our society. But one of the things that it tells us is it underscores the excessive value we place on things which will not last. And we do, don't we? We overvalue material wealth. We've come today to our final sermon in the series entitled Aha Moments of Life, in which we look at aha moments that certain Bible characters had. That a light bulb suddenly came on. They saw things more clearly. They were able to understand things better. They were able to look at things from God's perspective suddenly, and what we can learn from their experience. Today we're going to study an aha moment in Solomon's life. Aha from the bank account. Solomon was one of the wealthiest men who ever lived. 1 Kings 10, verse 14 tells us each year Solomon received about 25 tons of gold. In other words, that was his annual income, 25 tons of gold per year. Now, let's do the math. If we were to break that down, 25 tons into pounds and then into ounces, and multiply that by the current value of the ounce of gold, about $2,500, just to round it off, it comes to $2 billion. His annual income was $2 billion a year. Now, maybe you are tempted to think that couldn't possibly have been. This is just another example of over-exaggeration in the Bible. Evidence that the Bible is really more mythological than reality. But consider this. There are a few CEOs of multinational corporations in our world today who make $2 billion a year in salary and in benefits. Complete package. So this is not out of the realm of possibility. Suffice it to say, wherever you land on this, Solomon was a very wealthy man. And so his perspective is important to us. We will see what he learned about money and finances and wealth and how to earn it and how to spend it, the value of it. This morning we're going to look at several verses in the books of Ecclesiastes and Proverbs. Both of those are verses that Solomon wrote. And in each of them he referred to money and wealth several times. Apparently Solomon had varying views about money and wealth at different stages of life. In midlife, he had what we might call the common secular viewpoint. We read that in Ecclesiastes 10:19 when Solomon wrote, Money is the answer for everything. At some point in his life, Solomon believed that was true. And a lot of people do. Money is the answer. You might have heard someone say, or maybe you've said it yourself, if only I had more money, then all my problems would go away. Money is the answer. We're tempted to believe that. Do you know that there's a theology, actually, in Christianity that teaches that money is the answer, that God wills you to have wealth. It's called the prosperity gospel. The prosperity gospel teaches that it's God's will for you to be wealthy. It also teaches that poverty is a sin. Or, at least if you aren't wealthy, it's because of some sin in your life. You've been unfaithful to God. Or because of some lack of faith that you demonstrate. The claim in the prosperity gospel is that if you have enough faith, God will grant you wealth. In fact, the evangelists who preach the prosperity gospel will say something like this. If you have a sacrificial faith, enough faith to give sacrificially, especially to our ministry, then God will multiply what you have given in returns of 5-fold or 10-fold. Well, we can clearly see through that, can't we? They're manipulating desperate people to try to make themselves wealthy. But what they're teaching is that the more you give to God, the more he gives back to you. It's kind of a great financial wealth system, some investment strategy. But you have to have enough faith to give sacrificially. Even though we can see through that, polls indicate that a majority of U.S. Christians believe that our wealth is in some way tied to our faith or our faithfulness to God. And so to some degree, we have bought into the prosperity gospel teaching. Now, we know that money does not buy happiness, and it won't give us good health. Money does not provide us a good marriage or freedom from suffering. And we know that the Bible says that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. But we believe that if we had more of it, our life would be much better. We identify with the character from Fiddler on the Roof named Tevye, who, when someone told him that wealth is a curse, proclaimed, "Then may God smite me, and may I never recover." We'd like to suffer that curse, wouldn't we? Solomon, at one point in his life at least, believed that money is the answer. Wealth is the answer. And that caused him to seek it more and more. And so he testified to that in Ecclesiastes 2, verses 8 through 10. I amassed silver and gold for myself, and the treasure of kings and provinces. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. But after spending a lifetime doing that, Solomon came to the realization that he was wrong. And so he wrote this in the following verse, verse 11. Yet, when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, like chasing after the wind. In midlife, Solomon believed this common secular viewpoint that money is the answer. But in maturity, he developed a more spiritual viewpoint. He had actually several aha revelations through his lifetime about money. We're going to focus on one today. It's found in Ecclesiastes chapter 5, and that's going to be our sermon text for this morning. And in that chapter, Solomon tells us that from his own experiences and from what he's observed in life, that wealth does not satisfy. And he gives us 3 reasons why wealth does not satisfy. The first is this: wealth does not satisfy because it is never enough. Let's read that in Ecclesiastes 5, verses 10 and 11. Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. As goods increase, so do those who consume them. And what benefit are they to the owners except to feast their eyes on them? What he's telling us is that greed increases desire, and it's a never-ending process. We become more greedy the more we get, the more we want. At each income level we are at, we desire to be at the next income level. A Christian financial counselor related an experience he had in 1 week of counseling. He said in that week he counseled 3 different couples who were having financial problems. The first he described as living just above the poverty level. They were $8,000 in debt. He said they could not make their income stretch to cover their expenses, and they were in trouble. He described the second couple as a middle income level couple, but they were $40,000 in debt. They said, we just can't make it on what we're earning. The third couple, he said, was a couple whose income was $250,000 a year. They were $400,000 in debt and were considering bankruptcy. And he made a few observations from his experience with those 3 couples. He said if the couple living at the poverty level had heard the middle income level couple, and if the middle income level couple had heard the higher income level couple, they wouldn't believe that anyone making that much money could be in financial trouble. They would say, if we were making that much money, then all of our financial problems would go away. And then he observed, but they would be wrong. For within 2 years, they would be right back in debt again. He said the problem wasn't what they earned, it was materialistic greed and overspending. To paraphrase what we just read, that Solomon wrote in Ecclesiastes 5, as our goods increase, so does our consumption of goods. And the wealth just slips right through our fingers. That's what Solomon meant when he wrote this in Proverbs 23:5. In the blink of an eye, wealth disappears, for it will sprout wings and fly away like an eagle. Have you ever felt like that? You just see the dollar bills flying right out the window. We've had experiences like that too. Wealth does not satisfy, Solomon said, because it's never enough. There's a second reason he tells us in this chapter that wealth does not satisfy. It does not satisfy because it brings anxieties. Let's go back to the text and read verses 12 through 14. The sleep of a laborer is sweet, whether they eat little or much. But as for the rich, their abundance permits them no sleep. I have seen a grievous evil under the sun, wealth hoarded to the harm of its owners, or wealth lost through some misfortune, so that when they have children, there is nothing left for them to inherit. He's describing people who worry about their wealth. They have a lot of money, but it just increases their worries. And it's true, isn't it? We worry about the economy and rising costs. We worry about the Dow Jones average and how it is affecting our 401k plans. We worry about investment strategies and whether we will be able to retire comfortably. We worry about who is in the White House and how that person's policies are going to affect us economically. The more we have to worry about. And so Solomon wrote this in Proverbs 15:16. Better to have little with fear of the Lord than to have great treasure in inner turmoil. Wealth does not satisfy because it's never enough. Wealth does not satisfy because it brings anxiety. And thirdly, Solomon tells us wealth does not satisfy because it has no eternal value. Let's go on in our reading, verses 15 and 16 of that chapter. Everyone comes naked from their mother's womb, and as everyone comes, so they depart. They take nothing from their toil that they can carry in their hands. This too is a grievous evil. As everyone comes, so they depart. And what do they gain since they toil for the wind? We've heard it said, well, you can't take it with you. One preacher said, I have conducted hundreds of funerals, and I have never seen a hearse towing a U-Haul trailer to the cemetery. We know that. Solomon added personal commentary from his experience about those people who have all this wealth, and they realize that at the end of their life it's going to be gone, and they've toiled for nothing. And so because of that, he felt this anguish, this frustration, as he voiced in verse 17 when he wrote, all their days they eat in darkness with great frustration, affliction, and anger. That was how Solomon felt. He had been so successful at acquiring wealth. He had dedicated so much of his time towards that. He had therefore more than he needed. But what good was that? What good did it all do him at the end of his life? The truth is, we were created with the eternal in mind and not the material. Solomon wrote this in Ecclesiastes 3:11. Can we bring that up? God has planted eternity in the human heart. We are spiritual beings. We have eternal souls. We have something in us that longs for the eternal, and the material will never satisfy that longing. It was never meant to. We weren't designed that way. Then Solomon has a turning point in Ecclesiastes chapter 5. He has his aha moment when he discovers what he should have known all along, and it's this: true wealth comes from God. He gives us 3 aha principles that we can take and apply in our lives. The first one is this: life is a gift from God, so enjoy it. Let's read verse 18 of that chapter. This is what I observed to be good, that it is appropriate for a person to eat, drink, and find satisfaction in their toilsome labor under the sun during the few days of life God has given them, for this is their lot. Solomon said it's a gift from God that we can enjoy, have some satisfaction, be able to eat and drink and enjoy what God has given us. This is our lot, he said. Whatever your lot is, that is, whatever your income level, wherever it is God has placed you, however he has gifted you, whatever your status is, find enjoyment there. The ability to do that is a gift from him. Someone once said, wealth is not determined by how much you have, but by how much you want. Truly wealthy are those who want little and have everything they want. So, contentment is wealth. The Apostle Paul wrote it this way in 1 Timothy chapter 6, godliness with contentment is great gain. So life is a gift from God. Enjoy it. The second aha principle in these last few verses Solomon teaches us is that prosperity is a gift from God. Use it. Let's read verse 19. When God gives someone wealth and possessions and the ability to enjoy them, to accept their lot and be happy in their toil, this is a gift from God. God gives us the wealth that we have. He provides us the ability to provide for ourselves. He opens the right doors and closes others. Here's a general principle. God gives gifts for a reason. And the reason is for us to use those gifts. We can apply that in a lot of different areas of life. We're going to apply it to this idea of wealth and income. God gives us the gifts that we have for a reason, and they are to be used. Here are some examples of how we can use the wealth that God has given us. What I believe is the reason that God has given us whatever wealth he has given us. The first is he's given us the material wealth we have in order to provide a living for us and for our family. In 1 Timothy 5:8, we read, anyone who does not provide for their own relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. God gives us the wealth that we have to provide a living for us and our family. The second reason God gives us wealth is so that we can save for the future. In Proverbs 21:20, we are advised, be sensible and store up treasures. Don't waste them like a fool. God wants us to use a little common sense. He wants us to be wise about the future. He wants us to plan ahead and set some aside so that we can have some in the future. The third reason God provides wealth for us is that so that we might use it to finance his work. There's a principle of that that's taught in Leviticus 27:30. The very words of God himself speaking when he says, 10% of everything you harvest is holy and belongs to me. Keep in mind that this was written to an agricultural society. What he was teaching is that 10% of your wealth, 10% of your financial gain, 10% of what you have is holy. He said that means it's set apart. Set apart for what or for whom? It belongs to me, he said. God gives us the wealth that he does so that we can, in part, finance the work of his church. There's a fourth reason God gives us the treasures, the wealth, the income that he does, and that is to be used for our own enjoyment. Let's go back to verse 19 again, only this time we're going to read it in the New American Standard Bible. As for every person to whom God has given riches and wealth, he has also given him the opportunity to enjoy them and to receive his reward and rejoice in his labor. This is the gift of God. God gives us the wealth that he provides us so that in part we can have some enjoyment. He is a good God. He wants us to enjoy life. God will not condemn us for riding a Harley or driving a Mercedes or towing a big boat behind our pickup truck. God will not condemn us for living in a 4,000 square foot house or vacationing in Hawaii. God will not condemn us for carrying a Coach purse, unless you are a male, and that's a different issue. He won't condemn us for those things as long as we keep things in proper perspective. What is that proper perspective? Let's go back to our list of spending priorities. Provide a living, save for the future, finance God's work, and then use some for enjoyment. Unfortunately, some Christians only use their income for numbers 1 and 4. They never save for the future. They want what they want right now. They're going to enjoy everything that they can right now. They're not even going to think about the future. They'll worry about that when the day comes. And they don't finance God's work. That just takes too much of the money that they would like to use for themselves instead. And so they provide a living for their family, and then they use the rest for their own personal enjoyment. And that would be living outside of God's will for our finances. Let's review the 3 ahas. The 3 aha principles about wealth and finances. Life is a gift from God. Enjoy it. Prosperity is a gift from God. Use it. And then finally, real fulfillment is eternal. Secure it. We see that in verse 20. These people, that is, these people who have the proper priorities in place and are enjoying the wealth that God has given them and using it wisely, these people won't give much thought to their brief lives because God keeps them occupied with the joy in their hearts. What is it that provides a joy that helps us to forget the fact that our lives are brief, that we are here for a short time and we are gone? And the older we get, the faster that time comes. What is it that puts a joy in our heart that keeps us from that keeps us from remembering that and being in despair. It's having the security, knowing that our eternity is safe in God's hands. Our eternal future is secure. That prosperity gospel, if you give sacrificially, if you live by faith, if you live in faithfulness, God will reward you. God will bless you wealth. God wants you to be wealthy. That prosperity gospel might play well in upper middle class mega churches, but not in Uganda, where 82% of the people identify as Christian, but the average income in that nation is below $700 a year. Most of the people, including most of the Christians in that nation, live below the poverty level. Are we willing to tell those people that they are poor because they don't have enough faith? Or because they have not been faithful enough to God? Could we possibly be so arrogant as to believe that we are better Christians than they are, and God is rewarding each of us accordingly? Last Wednesday, the Watoto Christian Children's Choir performed here. They are from Uganda. It was the most amazing hour ever spent in this church building. The children on the stage all live in a Christian orphanage. Every one of them was either abandoned by their parents in their infancy, some in the hospital right after they were born, or their parents died when they were very young. Every one of those children have no family other than the other orphans at Watoto Village. But those children sang praise to Jesus. They stated, God is good. They gave testimony to how Jesus had saved them. They danced in celebration of their relationship with him. They are filled with joy. They do not have a penny to their name. They only have what few things others have donated to them. By our world standards, they have nothing. But by God's standards, they have everything. For they will one day live in a mansion built by Jesus himself. They will one day walk on streets paved with gold. We have a lot to learn from them about defining wealth. We are secure in the hands of God. We have a secure future in heaven with him for eternity. That is the wealth that matters. That is the wealth God wills you to have. He wants you to have that security, not depending upon material things and life in this world when there's something better for us. Jesus died so that you could have that security and that wealth. And he offers it to you now. If you've never accepted that gift, today is your day. And we invite you to come forward and accept Jesus as your Savior. Accept God's greatest blessing. Accept the true wealth that comes from him by accepting him as your God. Let's stand and sing our invitation hymn.